Hi, I'm Paul, and I am the lead research technician here at the How to Linux Research Labs. In today's video tutorial is going to be on how to install Julia on Pop! OS Linux 22.04. Okay, let's get started. Okay, Julia, in case you didn't know, it's kind of an obscure language to some degree. Kind of lives in the shadow of Python and some other more high-profile and well-known programming languages. Julia is a high-level programming language popularly used for numerical analysis in computational science. You can always go to their website for more information. In that URL, it would be julialang.org. While many Linux distros lack the documentation and/or require installing Julia from source, Pop! OS offers two simple install methods for installing Julia, and one is through the command line interface, the CLI, using the terminal. And another one is the Pop Shop, the GUI program, which comes with your Pop! OS installation down here. When you install through Pop, it'll also, not only will it allow you to install it without having to compile from source, but it will also track the latest Julia releases, so that Julia will always update to the latest available release whenever you update your Pop installation with sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade. Okay, so there's two ways of doing it, and we're going to do the terminal method because it's a little bit more of a challenge, although it's not really that hard to do this one. It's pretty straightforward. But I always like to kind of challenge myself and keep my skills up by using the terminal rather than just using a GUI. Okay, so here's my Pop installation here. And there's my neofetch. This verifies that we actually are in a Pop 22.04 environment. Okay. Then all the other particulars here. Okay, so we're on Pop 22.04. And as of right now, Julia is not on the path, and the command is not found. Once we're done, it should be the Julia binary should be it should be placed automatically on the path by doing it this way. Pop should already put the Julia binary on the system path environmental variable. And then you can see I also have another one here where we're trying to get the version, and that's not being found either. So once we're done, we'll get the version, and we'll also create a small Julia source code file with a .jl extension, and we'll run it into the Julia interpreter here, and then we'll get the output in the terminal. Okay, so we're going to install Julia on Pop, and it's simply installed by running a very simple command, really standard. This all looks probably familiar to everybody here. Sudo apt install, and just key in Julia, and that should prompt us to install. I didn't put the Y flag. That's probably why. If I put a Y flag here, it wouldn't stop here and prompt me. So this is good. You could read down some stuff here I got to do later. I'm not sure if I need to do the suggested packages. I'll probably skip that for the moment, although I think it's going to not do it here. Anyway, I don't have the suggested package installed, so we'll just go with whatever it's going to install. And it says it's going to use up 500 megabytes of space. Do I want to continue? Yes. So we'll Y on that, enter, and let it install. And then in the meantime, you can also go into the pop shop here, search for Julia. Pretty straightforward. Just look for the Julia logo, the icon, the colors, the green, the three dots, three circles, a green, a red, and a purple. Then you'll know that you have the proper program, or the proper, you're installing the proper entry when you're in the pop shop. Okay, so that was it. That was pretty simple there. And let's go ahead, and I think I just stay right here. And before, we weren't able to get a version. Let's see if we get a version now. I suspect we'll get a version, assuming that it's on the path and that I've keyed in the proper flag here, the proper option into the Julia command, the proper argument, I guess. So let's see. Okay, good. Now I don't know what version Julia is on. You can go to the website. I didn't do that before, and I didn't know what version we were going to get installed here. It might be a tad behind. I don't know until we do an upgrade. But for now, it's 1.9.1. Okay, so Julia is installed, and let's see what happens when we try to actually try to use the runtime interpreter here. Okay, that's good. Now we're in a Julia shell. Okay, so Julia has been installed. It's on the path, and it's ready to either be used in an interactive shell here, or we can put the code into an actual .jl source code file and pass that into the Julia runtime interpreter. So we're back with the code to run a simple set of commands into the interactive interpreter here. Then I'll open up an editor, Nano or some other text editor, and then to put the source code into the file and save it as a .jl source code file. Then we'll pass that into the Julia interpreter. Okay, keep in mind that Julia is not a compiled program. It's an interpreted program, so we don't have to compile anything. We just can pass in whatever our Julia code is into the interpreter here, into the interactive interpreter, the Julia shell, and we get instantaneous output. So print line is the function, and that's the argument into the function, or the input into the function, and then here's the output here. Okay, so this is working, and then we're going to go ahead. I'm going to show you how to put this into a .jl Julia source code file, and then run it from a script, from an actual file, source code file. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is use the make dir command, and I'm going to make a directory called Julia. So pretty simple here, and then we can verify that it was actually created. Okay, here it is here, and I'm going to just simply cd into it. Okay, then I can clear on that, and okay, we're in the Julia directory here. All right. And then I'm just going to use Nano. Normally, you want to use an IDE or an actual full-fledged code editor. But since we're not really doing a lot of, just one line, 2 lines, that's fine. If you're going to be doing a lot of coding, if you're going to have a lot of lines in your scripts and your source code files, then you want to use a full-fledged IDE or code editor. But for simple things like this, you can just use a Nano. You can use a terminal editor or whatever comes with your distro. In this case, like for instance, it would be gedit or whatever they call it now, regular text editor. So you can just open that up in a GUI, or you can just use Nano. I'm just going to use Nano for now, because that will be good for these purposes here. Okay, so this is the syntax for creating an empty file with Nano, and it's going to be called Julia. That's the name of the file with a .jl extension. So this will mark it as a Julia source code file with that .jl extension. Okay, so once I enter on this, it should give me a blank screen here, and it's only one line of code. Pretty simple. So the same thing that we did in the interactive shell, we're just going to do it right here. Same function, and I'm a Julia. It's that, I don't like hello world. It's a little too it's not professional enough. Everyone uses hello world. I always like to change it around a little bit. I am a Julia programmer. Okay, how's that? Let's go with that. Okay, so all we have to do is just save it now. And to save it, it's Control O in Nano, and then Control X to get out of it. Okay. Now we could stay in the Julia directory, but since Julia is on the path, we can go and run it anywhere in our file system. So let's go back to the home. Okay, we're no longer in the Julia directory where the source code file lives, but we don't have to be because Julia is on the path. And it's on the path because after I installed it, remember I ran the Julia version command, and it actually gave us some output on that. And again, this was the interactive shell denoted by the green prompt here. So keep these two things straight. One's an interactive shell, and the other one's the actual runtime. Okay, so we've created the source code file. So all we have to do is simply use the Julia command. Now, if you input here, it'll just take you right to an interactive prompt, which is not what I want to do, right? So I want to get out of there, and I just want to run that script. So I want to use the Julia command here, like this, and then I'm going to pass in the source code file. Okay, also two things to keep in mind are absolute path and relative path. Now this first line here, I was in that Julia folder where the Julia source code file lives, and I'm using the Julia command and just passing that source code file directly in. I guess this would be considered a relative path, if anything. And you can see we've got the output here, and then I use the cd command to go back to the home directory. So I was out of the Julia directory, and at that point, if I was to run the same command here, it would error. You'd get all kinds of error output to the screen. So here, when you're not actually in the directory where the source code file lives, you have to use the absolute path. And the absolute path is this right here: home, Paul, Julia, and the actual source code file here. So you see, once I keyed in the absolute path, I got the same output. Okay? So that's how you run it, depending on where you're at in the file system. If you're where it lives, you could just use the relative path, or just run it as is from where you're at, like that. When you're not in the same folder, where the directory where the source code file lives, then you're going to have to use the absolute path. So there's a relative path and or your current location, and then the absolute path there. Okay? Back with some closing thoughts. Okay, so that was how to install Julia 1.9 on Pop! OS Linux 22.04. So it was pretty simple. We just used the apt package manager to install Julia, and then I also told you about that you can also install it from the Pop shop as well. And then just how to go to a terminal and get the version with the Julia command, and then also how to go into a Julia interactive session, and then also the difference between the interactive session here, the interactive shell, and actually using Julia to run an actual script from a source code file. Okay, so that's that. You can also, Julia -- version gets you the version, and then the other way was, how to actually use Nano or some other text editor to create a source code file and put in the code, save it, and how to run it through the Julia command, depending on where in your file system you are. If you're where the file system lives, you can just use relative path, or just pass the source code file into the Julia runtime interpreter that way. Or if you're not in the directory where the source code file lives, then you have to get the absolute path. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so yeah, that was how to install Julia on Pop! OS Linux 22.04. I am Paul, and I am lead research technician here at the How to Linux Research Labs, and I thank you for subscribing and for watching and for your comments and your feedback. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.